think I've been doing something by saving, but then I don't have, where's my kind of wealth down the line? And then I think that's when I got into a few other um, finance books because I was making a decent amount of money on my deployment, and I was like, where the hell am I going to put all this money? And then from there, that's kind of what Rich Dad Poor Dad did to me. I think like I said, I don't think I read the whole thing. Still have a copy of it, like that I found at a Goodwill or something. But yeah, that was kind of my eye opening moment when I read that book.
Well, I think it's interesting because like with the whole Rich Dad Poor Dad thing, like I've never actually read the book, but everyone that I've listened to over the years has been so heavily influenced by it that I feel like I was influenced by it, but like kind of like you said, like never actually read the whole book, but it was enough. So, fast forwarding to now what you're doing with real estate or investing. I guess what was the first thing that you pursued outside of nursing? Because I know you mentioned you do copyright and you're doing real estate. And then what was your, I guess, kind of like first steps or how you found that and then how you started doing it?
I'll go the real estate side first. So when I got back from my deployment, it was like 2020, and I just dove into bigger pockets, and I was like, man, I need to buy real estate. And so I took like a bigger pockets rookie class. I think they had just started at the time. It was like, and I think I randomly started following people on Instagram and just like making friends with people in real estate. Like I was just DMing people that I thought were funny and or putting good information out. And I just started really networking with people on social media, to be honest. And then number two was I took like a rookie boot camp thing that was super cheap at the time. And that kind of pushed me into like figuring out your market, figuring out what you could afford, like all that sort of stuff. And then that's how I ended up buying my first property out of state in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's a long-term rental right now, and I bought it end of 2021 or something like that. So that was my first investment property I did. But when I got back from my deployment, I purchased my um, condo with a VA loan. So I paid like $6,000, and I got like a $300,000 condo a little south of DC. So those are my two rentals now. That was an MTR, and then my long-term rentals out in Chattanooga. But I will say the first two big steps I did for getting into real estate was just honestly starting following people on social media that invest and do real estate, and I just like made friends with them in the DMs. Not like a creep, but I was just like, "Oh, that's a nice story," or like, "Hey," and we just kind of connected there, and then started doing stuff, taking the whatever that boot camp thing was, or just taking a little free course and listening to stuff. Those were my first two big steps of how I got into real estate. And then when I bought my property and realized like, oh, I could eventually like rent this out, or kind of like my MTR income is like an overtime, like a bonus shift. Like if you were to go in for like at the time, I was like, oh, I would much rather take cash flow from my property than have to go in and do a bonus shift in a shitty, ER somewhere, right? And so that's why I was like, oh, I really need to start doing more of this. So that's how it was on the real estate side. And then how I've come to quit my nursing job right now is I started again through social media. Um, I made friends with people on Instagram, and my friend asked me to kind of help her do some content, and I was like, no, like I'll help you for like you don't have to pay me. And she's like, no, like I want to build my social media. I want to do this. I want to do that. Will you help me a little bit? And I was like, no. And I kept saying no for a couple months, and then I was like, fine, like I'll help you. And then from there, it just kind of it blossomed from me doing something for free for someone into a part-time job, into kind of a full-time role, into going to more networking things and word of mouth, people hearing what I did, and then I picked up more clients. And then from there I was bringing in like, over 10 grand a month from my little side hustle that I started. And then that's kind of, I was like, all right, I could quit, I can leave my nurse job for now. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is mainly copywriting, which I didn't even know existed or was a job, until people told me I was a copywriter. And then doing some content and stuff for people too. So I think it kind of comes back to the like saying yes to opportunities that like I'm interested in, to seeing if I like it or not. And then the real estate thing kind of stuck, and the copywriting content stuff is kind of stuck. So that's kind of my two paths how I kind of got there.
So it sounds like saying no for 2 months and then saying yes is the secret. In addition to, I mean, I guess what I got from all of what you were doing is, as far as like the first steps, it sounded like your first step was just networking and just kind of getting around people that are doing what you wanted to do. And I think, would you say that like, was it more so the accountability, like in terms of the real estate at least, was it more so the accountability that kind of drove you forward, or just like having the resources there and just kind of like seeing that it was possible?
Um, I would think the right answer to say would be accountability, because I think that's like what I should say. But I will say I'm also trash at like being accountable sometimes, especially with people around me. Like it wasn't like I had people being like, "Oh, you have to have this due at this time," kind of thing. I think it was more of just starting friendships through networking versus like looking at networking as a, how do I get myself around people that are doing what I want so I can, you know, not use them, but like use them to get where I want to
Yeah.
be. Versus like I just honestly just became friends with people that were doing what I wanted to do, and then it kind of blossomed into them giving me opportunities, and then kind of like networking word of mouth through there. But I will say, I mean, I've been through in a couple groups, and I think I've creating actual friendships versus like joining a group just for like shits and giggles to have them say I want them to keep me accountable. It was, I think that's helped me more along the way with my networking. And so the people that I've created friendships with are actually like, they're good people, they're doing good things, and they're not like, you know, scumbags trying to build a great business and rip people off from, you know, which I think sometimes you can run into those cliques, right? um, but I think from a networking standpoint, that was my number one thing. Because then people were like, "Oh, you need to make a social media," and I was like, "No, I'm not going to make another social media." So for months, I just had my one social media at the time, and I was doing some like, you know, nutrition coaching, because I've done some nutrition coaching and training for people on the side too. And they're like, do social media, and I was like, no. So for like a couple months I kept saying no, and then they were like, do it, and I was like, okay. And then from there it kind of grew. I met people, and people were giving me kind of opportunities. I kind of started to share my story, kind of share my personality, which I think created authentic networking relationships, which I think is what helped me get to where I am now versus wanting a group for accountability so I'd get stuff done. um yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it, or I retrospectively look at it.
I don't know. It's always difficult, like as we're, you know, branching out into social media and just trying to network. And I mean, I just like people. I like connecting with people, and Josh and I are both kind of the same in that. But it's like it's always like tough. Like when you're talking about your portfolio, you feel like I don't want to sound like a, you know, like I'm bragging or anything like that. And it's more like just trying to reach out and make these connections so that it's like we were influenced by people and we would love to like help other people out, kind of like you said. It's like, you know, so it's just like this thing of like kind of creating those authentic relationships like you mentioned. But it is tough nowadays because it does feel like wherever you go, either you feel like you're coming across as like you're just trying to use people like you said,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
other people are doing that with you. So what,
Yeah.
I guess what are you doing, like other than you're just kind of reaching out and just like following them? And I mean,
Yeah, to be
they always
honest,
talk
it's
about adding value. Did
mhm.
you ever like take that approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have. I mean, I think my personality is a value add for sure. But no, I think honestly, it's just kind of like the people, it was really small at the beginning. I think I just started following people. I started to just like, if they had a funny story, I was just like, oh my God, I loved, like, thanks for sharing that. And people might think that's not adding value, but I think that means a lot, because I think that makes me feel good when I'm sharing something on my social media and someone's like, oh my God, that's so funny, or hey, I relate to that, or hey, that's such a good tip. Like that's adding value too to the world versus like, oh, can you analyze this deal for me, or I can analyze this deal for you, or oh hey, I can cold call 100 people, or whatever the hell, you know what I mean? I think the people that stand out, that kind of go in, it's the, Gary Vaynerchuk, like jab 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 hook, whatever, where the book, I think he wrote it like 10 or 15 years ago. It's like a marketing book where it's just like, you know, give, and then you can ask, right? And I think adding value, yes, like don't be an ask hole where it's like, hey, do this for me, do that for me all the time. But I think for me, I just, you know, my adding value, or when people add value, I think, yeah, that's a great approach, but you don't always have to add value, because I think it's hard for someone who has no properties or one property to feel like they can go to a meetup and they're like, I can't go because I can't add value to someone. I've heard that a lot from people, you know, or like, hey, I can't go to here because I can't add value to them. When it's like, you know, if you're just trying to get to know them, people love talking about themselves. So if you just go to someone and ask them what they're doing, and they'll tell you something that you might not know, hey, 10 minutes down the road, they're telling you a story and you can help them. Hey, oh, I know someone that does that or needs like can help you do
Right.
that or something. That's a easy value add. But I think a lot of people, especially, social media puts it out there like you have to add value all the time. Like I think that's important, but at the same time, like don't limit yourself to like who you are is also adding value to just being like, thank you so much for making me feel good about putting this stupid story online because I thought that no one was going to watch it, and now someone watched it, and I feel good, so I'm going to continue to do that and continue to help people and kind of like trickle down the road.